Good morning, everyone. First of all, and everybody can hear me clearly as well, right? Fantastic. So good morning, everyone. So first of all, my apologies. I just couldn't attend this conference right in person as I had to quarantine, as she mentioned, due to the recent travel. But I really appreciate taking the time out to speak with us today, and also learn about Soroco today, right? So I'm really looking forward the learning something from you, from your strategic objectives during a roundtable discussion as well, right? Let me quickly introduce myself, right? So I joined Soroco close to 7 months back, right? And I'm based out of Toronto these days, hovering between Boston and Toronto. And prior to Soroco, I was heading the automation, digital transformation, and process excellence global practice, right, at TELUS, which is the telecom major in Canada, right? So with overall 22 years of transformation experience, spent a lot of my time working for GE, Prudential, Wipro, and IBM across different geographies. With my background, yes, I love transformation. I'm very passionate about it. And I'm also a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, very focused on design thinking, BPM, and also AI certified, right? But my present focus right now is to practice smarter process discovery through AI and practice complex and hyper automation as well. I'm also a keynote at OPEX and also a judge at the Global OPEX Awards, doing it for the last 9-10 years, right? So let me move on, and I just want to talk a little bit about Soroco today, right? So Soroco was founded in 2014, right, by Harvard, MIT, and CMU graduates, right, to basically help individuals and team to perform at level best, right? Initially, it was found as an automating company, how the various work processes are done in the organization, but they understood and they kind of faced that kind of challenge, right? That how do you really do initial consulting to discover those kind of processes? And then what they realized after speaking to a lot of customers and are collaborating with the customers, how do you really identify processes for automation and then kind of design, build and deliver the automation? So what we quickly discovered that each project, whenever we started, was taking a lot of time, right? Substantial time and effort to identify the right processes for automation, and as well as it was asking for additional resources to provide necessary documentation and to accomplish that kind of automation. Because of these associated delays and gaps in the process, right, and just to validate the traditional RPA practice, which led us to develop this Scout discovery platform. And initially for internal use and to help combat the kind of unknowns and understand the manual efforts. But overall, we are helping the clients. How do we really build their process transformation pipeline, right? Speaking of our customers today, we have 30 Fortune 500 companies using our solutions, right? Somewhat what you can see here. We also have 50 patents, which is a good deal right here now. And recently we added Procter & Gamble to our list, right? And that we are closely working with them. Yeah. Moving on to the next slide, Scout basically, was built in 2019, and I just mentioned to address the challenge to discover using machine learning, right? Now we are in a kind of journey to make Scout a SaaS product in the cloud, discovering kind of work graphs. And when I talk about the various customers and I hear different problem statements from the customer challenge. And things like, where do we really start? Customers come and ask me, right, where do they begin? And what is the highest value opportunities across the enterprise? Things like, what's my baseline? How do I improve? And when I say baselining, current team performance is pretty hard, right? And that's what we really help them. And also questions like, what should I clean up versus kind of automate, right? Where are the highest values areas where we need to understand, and and most importantly, how do we execute the change, right? And I think Soroco help answer those kind of questions and overcome these kind of blockers with our tool product, which is a Scout Enterprise and our automation suite along with the studio. But today, what I'm going to focus is the Scout, and I'm in the next few couple of slides, I'm going to focus on the technical aspects and how does it really work as well. All right. Today, if we really look at, there are multiple different market forces, right, which are accelerating the drive for digital transformation. And more than ever, especially after this pandemic scenario, and traditional forces of changes, which have seen more of a regulatory or a competitive innovation pressure. And when there are internal pressure, which are more of kind of outsourcing or digital sourcing, technology or process optimization. But in terms of how the entire momentum has been accelerated in these past few years, is the transformation pressure bottoms up, but just not looking at top down, but looking at aspect how the customer experience and how the efficiency for internal employees can be improved, as well as the evolution of our new work patterns, which means stuff really not getting done only inside our traditional ERP system, but there are different innovative ways and mechanisms where there are different productive tools, collaboration tools can be placed. Hence, these kind of new work patterns are kind of evolving. Yeah. Now, given this change, right, there are traditional methods which has been in place for some time for basically driving process discovery, process excellence or automation, right? So one of them is obviously the process mining space, and then the space itself, discovering, monitoring, and improving actual processes, but looking at the logs, right, in a typical scenario, right? And it's not what about you find in all types of application, but more specifically log-based application. And that's been there for what I am seeing it for last like 12 to 15 years. But typically the challenge with these log-based systems is that there are applications aware, and but they say they are kind of user blind, and there is also a very I would say heavy upfront IT integration and implementation effort involved in terms of realizing these kind of particular process mining endeavor, right? So overall, if you really look at, there is a length time to value, and there are potentially visibility gaps, what we have realized working with our customers over the last couple of years. Now, if you see on the right side of the screen, the second aspect is task mining. And I would say task mining is a complementary approach to process mining, where it basically ensures that the low-level event data, which is available in UI logs, are captured through computer vision, right? These UI logs are done by users on like kind of, keystrokes and mouse clicks and data entries, etc. But what we have seen with the task mining approach, which is currently prevalent in the industry, it is more in a screenshot driven or a, computer vision driven. That limit is scalability across large scale of users, which definitely one can use it in a smaller scale of team. And it has its own kind of set of issues like internal and privacy security challenge, because when it captures screenshot in a very traditional manner, or just to do a kind of a computer vision, basically, you really cannot capture the screen, and it always creates an issue from a PII standpoint as well. So overall, if you really look at, major challenge on these traditional methods is the scalability difficulty, right? So now, what I want to really talk about in this slide is, and what kind of we are bringing at Soroco, and I'm just going to use a simile metaphor, right, to kind of introduce a concept of what Scout does, and primarily what Scout approaches, just not at the application logs or just not look at the screenshot, but focuses on basically generating the work graph and helping make sense of undocumented activity at work. Now, so what do we mean by undocumented? To me, undocumented activities are stuff which people are like invoice processing team might be doing an application like Excel or Outlook chat, plus your core system apps, which could be your SAP or anything else, right? So stuff which is in SAP is documented because it is structured in a way. But what happens outside SAP is a kind of a unstructured and undocumented to a large extent. You might have SOPs, but you might not know all the ways of how the work is getting done. So kind of drawing a simile metaphor out here, if you were to compare the worker of Scout generates what is available on Google Map, right? And that's what I want to talk about. So if you really look at 20 years back, the maps which were available, but primarily more about the landmarks, right? And the landmarks are on this map, which you are seeing are basically the buildings like, Buckingham Palace, and two, I would equate that to the ERP CRM systems, which is out there. And that is the plethora of like kind of a small buildings, right, which are invisible on the map, but they do exist, right? And those, what we call it as like smaller apps or web applications. And if you really look at this particular map here, there are the streets, right, which are basically people used to navigate from like one building to the other building, which we are calling us here as kind of a variations. So people basically take different ways to kind of execute their work on SAP or inside Excel. And we are equating that to cars moving onto the streets per se. Now, in order for you to get like complete visibility of all, what you need to do a kind of a more of a granular view. So the map, what is relevant today, which we are kind of observing a day-to-day, or I would say in our day-to-day lives, which is more detailed in terms of showing not only the big landmarks, but the smaller building or the landscapes or the variations or the people moving around equivalent to cars. And now you're now actually be able to plot a complete activity of map, how I get from my house to work daily. Or I could say like end user going from his Outlook, which is kind of starting his day or doing something in SAP. And that is what we define as the work route, because this map would not much make sense if you're not able to see those kind of 10 buildings. Make sense? Similarly, if you are only able to view primarily the big applications like ERP, CRM, you'll not know how the work is happening across the landscape. So Scout basically here focuses and Endeavor, right, has been able to basically create end-to-end work graph, how an end user experience manifests in terms of executing work per se, right? And that is what our approach to task planning is. And what we have our own proprietary and patented technology in the space, which we call it as deep capture, wherein we don't rely on logs, but we don't rely on screenshots, we don't rely on computer vision, we rely on basically hooking into the operating system interfaces and driving deep context, which is your user context, application context, and process context. And then we stitch all of that together to create a structured view of your processes, which are your tasks per se. And this is what what I'm showing in this particular slide, right? So overall, if you say Scout as a product is very highly scalable to cover even thousands of users in your organization, right? And it also always architecturally collects actions and churns them into kind of a very high level insights. And once you kind of get insights, these insights are generated typically in less than 48 hours. And it helps identify the root cause to drive change programs by identifying those kind of hotspots. If I really go back and wear my process excellence hat, right? I mean, I recall like 10 to 12 years back, we were doing very manual value stream mapping, right? To understand your lead time, cycle time, and takt time, right? And that was a very tedious process, like, getting into a room and collaborating people and getting the SMEs in the room and, understanding your lead time, cycle, takt time, understand where are your kind of mudas and the non-value adds, and you take it out. So, this is all gone now. I think this all can be really captured by Scout and it can be generated in 48 hours for across 1,000 users. Yeah. Let me move on to the next slide here. All right. So if you really look at here, what the slide is stating is, this is basically our experience of having worked with multiple clients, right? And what we have seen is 75% of the work has undocumented interactions. which is happening in terms not in our core systems, but in terms of additional kind of productivity applications, chat, and Outlook, right? And as we all know, right, Outlook happens to be the #1 tool, right, which primarily gets all across the board, right? And if you really have to look at this again, a study which we did, like typically when I'm outside my office hours, basically I do a digital interactions on social interactions. I do find interactions on sometimes like Facebook equivalent for say, right? I mean, that's what I want to give that example. So maybe like 5 social interactions a day. But in our workplace, we do about 2,000 interactions per user, and which is an extremely high volume of data, which is untapped, which is the clicks and the keystrokes what we execute day to day on my work. And what we are doing is we are focusing on those 2,800 interactions, basically what we are capturing as clicks and keystrokes and trying to structure sending all of those undocumented interactions in the form of a process flow. And as you know, these recommendations, what we really generate, help us to automate or, recommendation to do process improvement, right, as well. As our approach is inherently scalable because we are not leveraging constrained by advanced technologies like computer vision, but we are basically focusing on the end metadata. And whenever I think about meta, look at the Facebook, right? So the kind of the kind of data what they're capturing from an end user interactions, right? We are able to generate the first insights in less than 48 hours. And that's the beauty of Scout. And then the third point, what I really want to make here is we also provide beyond discovery, right? And when I say the ability to prioritize the recommendations and then chart, map path to value realization. If you recall, I was talking about when the customers also talk about where is the baseline? How do we really understand the value? Where is my overall ROI? And how do I grow X, 3X or 10X, to my CIOs? And that's the tool what we have is called Studio, right? Which helps us to chart map to the value realization. So that's in a nutshell, what we do with this kind of a work graph, right? And the first one, what we discovered is a work graph, and they kind of provide recommendations on the work graph to drive these kind of change program, and that really helps the change management as well. Yeah. Any questions till now before I move on to the next slide? Yeah. All right. So in this particular slide, I really want to talk about what is our kind of unique differentiation, right?
Can you hear me? Sorry, I had a question.
Yeah, sure.
And this is just it's both the previous presentation and yours as well. From the IT organization, we get it. The challenge we always find is convincing the CEOs and the CFOs that these transformation, data mining, like what you were describing, even some of the other strategies. So what I'm looking for maybe to get from this is, how do I make them understand that this is important? Because at the end of the day, yes, we have a lot of issues that we can see that are coming from now having transformation in some of these processes in place. But I think what we're looking from the IT organization is really how do you help us educate our senior management, especially the CFO and the CIO and the CEO, I mean. Thank you.
No, I think it's a very valid question, and I think and that's what I wanted to capture, the unique differentiation what we have, and I think I'll be able to answer this question typically when I move on to my last slide. And is that okay if I can come back to you and park this question there? Yeah. So what I was saying here is, when I was talking about this can really help to go and apply the change management as well. On this particular slide, right, I just want a little bit talk about what is a unique differentiation, right? And then I'll definitely come back to your answer as well. So one is the unique level data capture, right? And then what we call it as a deep capture. Once you have captured the data, obviously we don't need to hook up any of our existing internal IT system. It's just the data agent deployed on the end user's desktop, right? Zero integrations into the IT systems, apart from basically requiring the kind of ability for you to distribute the agent through your existing packaging technology, right? And for the end users, what we are doing is, and that will also answer your question that how do we generate the ROI? We are able to collect across all type of applications, because we don't believe that we are kind of constrained now, right? And it could be there's a particular application for which maybe we're not able to collect data, but we can build a data agent extension for your app, which is very unique to the environment per se. And then once we have kind of captured the data, the process of applying machine learning algorithms, right, to kind of discover these tasks and processes, what we call it as semantic layering here, right? So we are able to do a kind of a deep capture and then layer. So the activities which we apply supervise a mix of supervised and unsupervised learning algorithms to basically construct task flows and process flows. And then we show all the activities which happens when a user execute based on like kind of what Scout observes. What we don't have is what we don't rely on the backend transactions, because we are only capturing the clicks and keystrokes per se. So, but Scout gives you a 360-degree visibility in terms of how work is happening. For example, I get an invoice processing action in Outlook email reminder right from the time I click on it. So the time may be to do some data checks in Excel and Word, and then go data into SAP, and then come back. The entire work graph is what we are able to construct Scalable, right? And right with that, we redact that source when it comes to an agent. How do we hit it? So one of our very key aspect, what we do out here is we provide solutions for process optimization. And once we have process optimization, which could be a process improvement like user training, or it could be automation, or it could be basically have vendor agnostic RPA connectors, and we can have the process flows from Scout into another product, right, through our studio, which can generate your automation code. As of today, we support 2 platforms, which is UiPath and Blue Prism, but we have Automation Anywhere coming in next month, right? And that's what you'll be able to generate any usable code where you can deploy, or kind of understand the human interaction required, and that's how it is, right? Now, this particular slide. Sorry, I don't know why it is jumping here. Yeah, and I'll definitely come back to your answer on that. It's still parked in my brain, right? So in this particular slide, I like to kind of summarize, right? How do you give a kind of a blowdown how the funnel, the Scout works, right? So first thing is, right, if I just explain right now, there are bunch of task, right, activities which users are doing, or task discovery classifies them as tasks, which is basically 10 to 15 steps, or I would say 15 steps maybe, that is discovered through the unsupervised machine learning. With task discovery, what you can do, you can export a particular task if you want to kind of feed into your tactical automation. Like there are a small task which you want to automate, or your SME is able to recognize that can be fed into kind of an ERP provider, or you could automate it at a report generation, right? Or typically those tasks you want to create a kind of a process discovery pipeline. Now, when you asked me this question, I didn't get the name when you said that how do we really go back to our IT leaders to show where is an ROI. This one actually helps you to build up your process discovery pipeline, right, through the supervised machine learning. And obviously, when you're starting this point, you are actually creating the kind of a baseline. And this is the baseline when you are automating it or automating it, and obviously depending if there is a human intervention required or not, you can actually show that ROI. I mean, and then when we do a demo at a later stage with you, you'll be able to see how the value realization is happening, which you can actually go back to your CTOs and explain them with these insights, you can generate a good ROI there. So on this one, when I was trying to explain, the entire funnel, right, once you have the tactical automation done, and once you kind of discover the processes, and these work insights will actually recommend the change levers on the top of the graph. So if you really give you the automated ability, or if I tell you your user training, or any info data release and stuff like that, so these inputs are important. And once you have these things done, then the studio basically, and which I was only talking about the Scout right now, but if you see, we have a product called Studio, which basically helps you not to look at your as is process, but it also gives you a space basically to create your future state process map. And obviously, once you have the future state process map using a standard notations, right, you could export output into BPM 2.0, or you want to create the PDT out of it, and that's a very high level flow, right? The way it works, right? So it's like a funnel. We start broad tasks, giving you a telescopic view, and the process gives you a kind of a microscopic view, right? And the studio basically ensures help you learn your discovered processes for action going forward, right? And that's what I want to end up this session on. Yeah. Thank you.
So, Francis, you asked that question to me as well. So my take on this is, yes, IT organization understands what is needed because they are inherently aware of the IT landscape, how tight or loose the integrations are, what all stuffs manually needs to be done in order to keep the business running. When you roll all that information up to your top management, CFO and CEO, all they want to know is the organizational efficiency of doing what you're doing. If you're a manufacturing unit, how much time, cost you are taking, labor, material you're taking to produce what you need. What is your waste percentage and all that. So typically in my consulting experience, whenever I need to go talk to that C-suite that understand, for the lack of better word, balance sheet impacts of what you're not doing efficiently. So I always go and talk to them in the metrics or KPI manners, right? So if I collect enough credible information about what is my cost of goods sold today versus what it needs to be compared to my industry peers, what is my cost to serve, what is my customer experience score, and how it is reflecting to how I'm able to deliver, right? In some companies, availability to promise is a big issue, right? So you're not able to very efficiently programmatically calculate your ATP and then commit to the customer. You always miss deadlines, and that impacts your relationship with business. So in order for you to convince your C-suite about this transformation is needed, we have to talk the KPI language. And one of the reasons why process discovery and process mining using platforms like Soroco is becoming important is it helps you craft that story without spending a lot of time of your busy business people. Nobody has time to spend 2, 3, 4 weeks in a workshop setting to really tell you how they do what they do. So this is your road to fast forward that and then collate that business case and make it up. And what I have done every time I have sold platforms like Soroco, there are multiple consumptions possible. So one popular consumption today is platforms like Soroco identifies very systematically RPA candidates. I'm enthusiastic about RPA. I want to automate some of my business processes in my core finance, in my supply chain, in manufacturing operations, but which processes should I automate? What makes sense from an ROI standpoint. So process discovery leads to a very qualified ROI driven funnel to automate. That is a classic consumption use case. The other use case is if you're embarking on a big S4 transformation, let's say, or S4 including EWM and TM and stuff like that. So the fundamental aspect of doing a successful transformation is what, and Karthik add to your thoughts as well, is a perfect blueprinting exercise where you capture your as-is processes in a minute detail, understand how it is done today, at a process level, also at an application level, and also then construct your to be process. So platforms like Soroco helps immensely to drive that blueprint from an as-is standpoint. So it will give you clear-cut metrics, workflow maps, as the keynote was talking about, and those are very clear-cut consumptions. The third is I want to really understand where I should focus from a transformation standpoint. As I said, right, supply chain is a broad topic. It starts from supply chain planning, procurement, manufacturing operations, distribution. Which one is the most hurting right now, and why it is? You can discover that and then plan your transformation steps like that. So these are few areas where I have seen AI enabled process discovery help move the needle along, and then sort of crunch your transformation timeline altogether. You're not looking at 6-8 months of study and then deciding where to go. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I know we have a lot of folks joining us remotely. Does anyone have any questions? Perfect. Yes.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up I have. Is change management part of the process when you do this, especially in the organizations that are not used to, they've been running traditional ERP and within manufacturing and the overall supply chain as they run today, what they get is what they used to it. So anytime we're talking about, IoTs and all the other IT related stuff, I mean, change management is going to be important.
I'm going to kickstart the answer, and then we have a best guy to talk about it in the audience, Karthik, who leads our digital enterprise business, and he has seen it all, good, bad, and ugly implementation, and he understands the importance of organization change management better than a lot of people. So a short answer is organization change management is integral to any transformation, especially at the scale that we are talking about. You have one platform on ERP, you are going on an S4 journey, or you have undertaken an enterprise RPA that you want to automate. A lot of jitters, right? What it is, what is going to do and stuff. Or let's say you are deciding to implement EWM to all your warehouses and TM. So without OCM, let's say that there is a very high percentage chance of you not achieving the sort of ramp up in performance that you are hoping, and your slope to ramp up would be very, very slow. So Karthik will talk about OCM. I want him to talk 5 more minutes about how we approach OCM. The short answer to your question is yes.
Yeah, thanks, Amit. So from the OCM standpoint, see, every transformation as we see today goes through what has been thought of and what ends up eventually. That's a lot of things, right? So how do you set an expectation? So a lot of examples in the real world. I knew some customers where they want to have a state-of-art systems. Example, I've been through warehouse implementations using SAP EWM example. During our pre-sales, the entire team who comes forward says that I want to transform my entire business to today. Maybe I'm making the 10,000 units shipping out. I want to move into, say, improve by another 30%. Maybe that kind of metrics they are thinking initially. The audience who wants to look at is a complete different audience. So that expectation is initially set. But as we start engaging into the team, there's a different set of audience comes in. There's a business stakeholders like your operations manager, your supervisor. Example, a set of audience comes in. These are the people who are actually the users of the system, right? They need to be educated what exactly we were supposed to get at the end state. Now, a classical example I can quickly recollect is that I'm using the process today as 3-4 steps. I need the exact 3-4 steps in my newer system. So they need to be really educated. Okay, whether these additional 4 steps is really needed. Can I make this better for you? What is my industry best practice, right? So these guys would have seen that system's been 15 years, 20 years in this particular system. They've got used to it as enough. But when we land up, we have seen more customers, different types of landscape, different industries. So when we are able to tell them there are better ways to do it. I can reduce the number of steps for you. I can give you a higher visibility. There could be an easier way to do this. Now, how do you get that into them, right? That's a mind transformation also. It's not just supply chain also. So we have to transformation their mind also, saying that. So sometimes I have a very recent example, a simple concept where would have a typical customer who is well aware of the current processes. He might have just spent maybe a day's workshop and have done it. This one of this customer which I know, it took 3 days to really tell him to change from what he was doing from his processes in SAP ECC. Okay, he says, no, exactly, I want that in EWM. No change. Why are you saying this? Why am I doing this? Can you go back to SAP and try asking this 10 questions? And we know the answer, right? So they want to hear us from more and more experts and say that, okay, there are better ways to do it. Then they say, okay, I want to start involving my leadership to take a decision. The matter was actually very simple matter, which could have just knocked it off, right? So that education in terms of how you make them transform from a people point of view is also equally important. It's not just about the overall engagement. It's all that simple things matter. So a guy who is doing a procurement and he is doing in few steps, he wants to do that. There are some unsaid things which comes out later in the process. Example, this guy is probably using an Excel to make a VLOOKUP to try to take an informed decision and then feeds into the system. He may not even say in the beginning. So those kind of process automations which we run, we should be in a position to able to record all those touches which he's doing the system. That is one more from a system point of view. Second, telling him is what is that to be which we need to move forward rather than just carry forward the as is in a state of art system. That doesn't really help. So we are not able to justify that ROI, right? So the next question, ROI, comes into the picture. So eventually, what is that I'm getting? I'm moving from a paper-based system to a digital system. Yes, so my ROI jumps significantly. I'm already using a mobile system. So what is that I'm getting benefit? So that tangibility is what we need to really provide. The metrics is one part of it. What is he saving? Example, one of the classic case which I saw, they have a SAP system, they're running good, but they're still printing a pick list. They're saying, I want to control my associates to provide a paper to ensure that they systematically do certain tasks in the warehouse. So does it really need it? And what is that mind behind it? Why are they trying to do it? So if you are able to knock these things and try to tell them, okay, there is a better way to do this. There is a better approach to do this. These are the steps which we can achieve this. So this OCM piece starts so early in the game, even at the time when you start engaging and land at the customer, it carries on till you move the systems to a go live state. Even after the go live, you have to ensure and enable that are you doing the right thing. It's possible that they have figured out a shortcut trying to make the same VLOOKUP in a different way. That's it. So that is something where enablement has to be done, ensuring that till the end state where you're achieving the goal is important. Example, we might say that, okay, putting a new age system can give you a 20% improvement, but it may not have crossed 8% also. When we actually look into the systems, they might try to do certain things extra, which we never knew. So that continuous education has to be there, and it needs to be till at the end of the life cycle. It cannot stop.
It is always tailor-made for a customer situation, for the transformation that he's picking, but OCM needs to be integral. One of the customer that we are still fighting, in a sense, discussing that we are trying to convince him that there is a system integration effort. He is coming from a mindset, I don't know why, but saying, I have bought SAP EWM, your job is to just come and install it, and my understanding is it will start working. So then we have to educate him, no, configuration, integration, testing, understanding requirements, all takes effort. So depending upon where the customer's situation is, we change the OCM effort accordingly. If OCM is integral, yes.
So there's one more part of it. There is also a golden question. Do you need an OCM? Because a lot of customers I have seen, they look at as sometimes they look as a function which is integral part of this, and some customers look at as a cost. Why are you bringing this? Why your project team is not sufficient to do this? Can you not double them up to the same task? So it's a very, very focused area. You need a different kind of audience to reach them. Sometimes an external audience may not so connect well as their own internal stakeholders. So it is also important to rope one of these end customers to say that, hey, we need two of you because they listen to you, right? We can tell you what is right, but sometimes it may not reach the way we want to make it reach. So that internal stakeholders alignment needs to be there to make this more successful and effective as well. So I think that's a collaboration in this OCM world needs to be definitely there.